Welcome back to American Original Dollhouse Miniatures and More. My name is Todd, and today I am going to be walking you through the building of the Romeo and Juliet Birdhouse Kit. It's my simplest kit that I have available, and it's absolutely perfect for beginners. Before we get started, there's a few things that we're going to need. Number one is some sticky masking tape. In this case, I'm using a Sherwin-Williams CP66 1-inch masking tape. You can also use 1.5 inch if you prefer. I think it's a little easier to use the 1 inch. You'll also need a number 2 Phillips screwdriver. You'll need a pencil, a scissor, or in this case I'm using a utility knife. An X-Acto knife would work well too. You're going to need a damp and a dry rag to wipe excess glue off. Also, as an option, you can use rubber bands in a few of the steps. So if you have rubber bands, you can use those, not necessary. And you could also use a carpenter square to help square the body up. Again, that's not necessary. I will show you how to achieve that without a carpenter square. Inside the box, the first thing you're going to find, along with the instructions, you're going to find an insert sheet. Please read through the insert sheet thoroughly before beginning. On the inside of the insert sheet actually shows the parts that come with it, and also there's a couple of templates that you can cut out. So read that thoroughly before you begin. And then also the instructions, I recommend reading through the instructions too before you actually start. At least at the minimum, read through the entire set, the entire step before you proceed with that step. Inside the box, you're going to find some sandpaper. Now that may vary from what I have here. You're going to find 4 corner trim pieces, and you can find the descriptions of all these pieces inside of that insert that I showed you. 4 trim pieces, corner trim pieces, 4 more side corner trim pieces. You're also going to find the balcony parts, the small balcony parts, the bird door. You're going to find 2 shutters, the flourish, 1 glue bottle. You're going to find the base, and that has the countersunk holes in it. The front of the birdhouse, the back of the birdhouse, 2 roof sections, and then 2 side sections. So with that, let us begin with step number 1. We'll be back with step 1. All right, in step 1, we are going to build the body. So you will need the back panel, the front panel, and the 2 side panels. Starting with the front panel, with the beveled side facing down, then the side panel, also with the side miters facing down, this miter on the top facing up. With the other back panel, the same thing. And finally with the last side panel. I am going to use a base, or the base, to help with the alignment. So straddling the base across the first 2, the front and the first side panel, pull them tightly to the base and then tightly to each other. We'll apply 1 piece of tape right down that seam. Okay, we'll slide the base over to the next 2 panels. Make sure again that they are perfectly flush. You want to make sure that they're very tight to the base. If there's any gaps in this, don't worry about that. The gaps will go away. Again, another piece of tape going down that seam. And also, it's a good idea to just dust off the panels before you start. There may be some dust residue on them, so if you just wipe them with a dry cloth, dry rag, and get rid of that, the glue, or the tape, I'm sorry, will stick a little better. And then finally, with the last two sections, again, making sure that they're pulled tight to the base, and run a piece of tape down the seam. All right, we can lose the base, and we're going to put one across the bottom of each seam and one across the top of each seam. Okay, grabbing the top of the front and the top of the back panel, just carefully flip the four sections over. So now the miters are facing up. Okay? We're going to run a bead of glue down each one of the valleys as well as one side panel. And the amount of glue is about the size of a grain of rice. So it does not take much glue. And then stop short of the top and the bottom. You don't need to go all the way down. That will avoid glue spill out of the bottom or the top. Then I am going to apply to the side panel about in the middle or maybe a little bit higher. That will prevent the glue from dripping down before we get it folded closed. Make sure you keep your glue bottle closed in between so it doesn't dry out. And now it's just a matter of folding up the pieces. So just fold up one side, fold up the front, and then close the two together. Lay it flat on your surface. And then we're going to apply 3 more pieces of tape. Now I'm pushing down firmly to make sure that all of the bottom panels are flush. Now I'll apply tape to the front, pulling gently, not too tightly, but just pulling slightly. Wrap it around that corner. That'll pull the joint together. Put one in the middle, and again the same thing, just pull it somewhat firm. And finally at the bottom, we'll do the same thing. And we'll try that again. Okay. And it doesn't take a whole lot of pressure. And just make sure the rest of the glue, the rest of the tape is still firmly attached. And the birdhouse sits flush, which it does. Now, in order to square the birdhouse, I am going to use the bird door. It happens to be a perfect 90-degree corner. So we're going to use that on the inside of the birdhouse. Now I'm just setting it up against one corner of the birdhouse. And in this case, I have a little bit of a gap. So my gap is on this side. So I'm going to put pressure on these two corners. So this corner and this corner, just a small amount of pressure. Check again and just continue, repeat that until it is tight, which it is tight now. You can also use a piece of tape going from corner to corner to help hold it if it's stubborn. It's not necessary. In fact, I'm not going to do it, but I'll do it just to show you. You can wrap a piece of tape. Make sure you cut it long enough. And I just put it down the front, wrap it over, and just pull it kitty corner to the other side. And don't pull it too tightly, and just watch your door on the inside as you do that. And your door should be nice and square. And I will show you with the other camera here. And there you can see the door and the fact that the body is square now. So it's as simple as that. And like I said, if you do have a square, you can certainly use a square also. If you are using a square, just put the square on the outside and check that it is perfectly square. And it is. If it's off just a little bit, it's not going to really make that much of a difference anyway. So we will put this aside and allow this to dry while we move on to step number 2. We are going to glue the sides to the inside or to one side of the front balcony piece. Now these little ends are porous, so they will absorb more glue. So what I like to do is just put a little bit of glue on the end and just rub it in with your finger. And then apply your right size bead of glue on top of that. Or actually in this case, it's a little bit thicker, but no matter. Holding the front firmly to the table, I am going to line up the top and the bottom and also one side, and I'm just going to lean it in. Okay, so it pushes the glue towards the middle. That way I don't have glue squeeze out on the outside. I'm going to repeat that with the other one, the other side piece. Again, just a little bit of glue. Fill in some of those pores. And again, a right size bead of glue. Line up and tilt in. And just make sure from there that we are flush with the top, the bottom, and the sides, or the sides, sorry. Okay, before I wipe any of the glue squeeze out on this piece, I'm gonna let it dry for about 5 minutes, just to let it tack up. So I'm gonna set that aside and let's move on to step number 3. All right, I've allowed the body to dry for about 10 minutes. I'm going to carefully, it's not completely dry, so I'm going to be very careful. You might want to let yours dry a little bit longer than I did. Due to time constraints, I'm going to keep rolling with it. And I don't have another one prepped. So I am going to pull the tape off. I'm just going to pull one side at a time carefully off here, and we are going to install the side corner trim. Now the side corner trim is the piece with the little miter. It's the smaller of the two. This is the side, this is the front and back. So we got side, front and back. And I'm going to start with the side piece. Now it's important that you line up the side trim with the bottom. It must be flush with the bottom. It's going to extend a little bit above the side piece. Now the reason the side pieces are slightly shorter is to allow airflow. Once the birdhouse is complete, there'll be a little gap there, and that'll allow airflow to flow through the birdhouse and hopefully prevent it from overheating. So the first thing I'm going to start with is a side piece. The long side, this is the long side, is going to go towards the birdhouse. That's going to attach to the birdhouse. Now to align it, I'm going to use one of the front trim pieces. It doesn't matter actually what you use to align it, but I'm just going to use that to help make sure that it is flush. With that, I'm going to apply again our small bead, right sized or so, right down the middle of the side trim, and I'm going to save time and do 2 of them. Just a small bead right there, and I'm going to pull this tape off also. So now I have one side of tape removed. Holding the front back trim piece, I am going to set this one flush up against it. And again, like I said, you must be flush with the bottom, not necessarily with the top. And just push it in so it is tight with that front corner piece. And that is it. I'll hold it down just for a few seconds while it dries. Or actually, not while it dries, but while it tacks up. And moving on to the other side, I'm going to use the same front and back piece. Holding it up and making sure, again, it is flush with the bottom and flush with the side. I'm going to hold that for a few seconds again. While that dries, I am going to install the corner screw blocks, which is one thing I forgot to show you in the box, but there will be 4 corner screw blocks, and those are going to go on the bottom, and that's to mount the base to the house. So we are going to attach these so they're about 1/16 of an inch from the bottom of the birdhouse, and I'll get a close-up here for you in a second. Let's apply some glue. Now you want a little more glue on these than other parts, so what I'm going to do is apply 2 beads of glue to both, and also all the way to the corner, to both of the 90-degree sides. So that's the 90 degree. You want those 2 sides. Then again, about 1/16 to 1/8 of an inch. You can go up to 1/8 of an inch, but 1/16 is, well, either way it works just fine. You don't want to go above 1/8 of an inch. You want your screws to be able to reach, and you want your screws to go in far enough. I will do the second one. Again, 2 lines of glue. Now this is holding the base on, so that's the reason you want a little more glue on this. The base is going to be screwed on, so the force of the screws point against it, you're going to want the extra glue. So again, about 1/16 of an inch in. And that 1/16 inch, all that allows you to do is it just allows you to make sure that the base gets pulled tight so it's flush with the bottom, so there are no gaps. So that's why you want the 1/16 of an inch. So there you can see the 1/16 inch gap that we have, or thereabouts. Now I will do the front and back corner trim pieces. Now these ones are a little more particular on how you have to install them, because you don't want them to hang off the bottom, you don't want them to hang off the top, and you don't want them to hang off of the side. So you want the top, the bottom, and the side to be flush. Again, a rice-sized bead of glue down the center is all you're going to need. And make sure you're gluing the correct side, the side that you're working on. So if I was working on this side, obviously that would be the wrong side. So this is the right side for this side. I am going to hold that in place, lining up again, like I said, the top, the bottom, and the side. And you want to do this, the 2 corner pieces close enough together that you can adjust them if necessary before the glue dries. So I'm just going to hold this for a few seconds here. And you can apply tape to hold these in place. I find it's a little more difficult to apply the tape, and they seem to stay just fine without the tape. And this one has a little bit of a gap, so actually I am going to use a little piece of tape on this one. Just going to pull that together without moving them. And if you put one on the bottom, you're going to have to put one on the top also to even out. Otherwise, it'll want to pull away from the opposite side that you taped. Now I'm pulling it fairly tight to make sure that I am pulling everything together, and I would not worry about any gaps. If you have any gaps in the side, that's just fine. That is going to look just natural. It's going to look like a shadow line when you're done. We'll go to the other side. Again, now make sure, this time we're working on this side, so I want to apply glue to this side. Right size bead right down the middle. Holding, again, the side trim. Lining up the top, the bottom, and the side. I will hold that in place. Just for a couple of seconds is just fine. And again, I'm going to apply tape on that, so just for the fact of not having to stop, so I can continue here. So I'm going to apply 2 pieces of tape. Now I'm starting from the front so I can pull it tight to the side. Again, start from the front, press it in place firmly, and pull taut. You don't have to pull this tape super tight, but it does stretch quite a bit, which actually works in your favor to pull the parts together. So now I'm just double checking to make sure that I am flush with the bottom, and I am flush with the top. All right, I flipped the birdhouse over and I have attached the other corner trim pieces along with the last 2 of the screw blocks. I am going to set that aside for 1 second just to get it out of the way. And now we are going to work on the roof. We want to align the miters together. Again, with the 45 miters facing down, pull those together using the base again like we did in step number 1. We're going to align the roof panels so they are flush with the roof panel. So you want everything tight and flush together. We will apply a piece of tape all the way down the seam. Again, like we did with the side, we'll apply 3 pieces this time going across the seam. Move the base out of the way, let's flip it over. Again, we're going to apply a small bead of glue to the inside of the miter. And in this case, I actually have one ready. We'll close that panel. Make sure that none of the glue squeezes out. If you get any squeeze out, make sure you wipe it with your rag before continuing. We don't want the roof to attach to the body quite yet, but we are going to place the roof on the body to get the shape right and to allow it to dry. So we'll place that centered over the house. And again, with the tape, now this is where you can use the rubber bands also if you prefer. If you have rubber bands, you can use those. I prefer the tape, but you can put rubber bands like so, and it's going to take a few of them to hold it tight. But now remember, we're not attaching the roof to the body at this point. We're just gluing the roof together. So I'm going to apply 1 piece of tape to the roof like so. Pull the tape around until, while pushing down on the roof, until it is tight to the body. Now you want to make sure that you don't have any gaps in there or the back side. You also want to run a piece on the back side and do the same with that. Now set the roof aside and allow it to dry for at least 10 minutes before continuing on. Once it's sat for 10 minutes, you're going to carefully remove the roof and just stand it on end somewhere safe and allow that to dry. I have one ready to go here. This one is already done and ready. Okay, if you haven't already removed your tape, remove your tape now. We will be installing the bird door along with the 2 shutters and also the balcony itself. Now the shutters, I just want to point out, have a bottom and a top. The wide part goes at the bottom. Make sure that these 2 are both at the bottom. So you got a wider side and just make sure that goes to the bottom. Now there is a template that you can use for installing the bird door, and it just follow the markings on it. It will tell you line it up with the trim. Now this lines up with the trim. The door lines up here, the side of the door, and the door bottom lines up here. And the bottom of this part is the bottom of the house itself. I'm not going to even cut that out. You don't necessarily need that. It's not a necessity. I am just going to place the bird door in the opening roughly where I think it is right. And I'm just going to apply a bead of glue around the opening itself, and then just some down at the bottom. And I'm just going to make sure it's all the way around there to make sure that there are no gaps. We don't want any water to get in there. Then again, I'm just going to line it using the bird hole and just eyeballing it so it is straight. But again, you don't have to eyeball it. You can use the template that came with your birdhouse. So I am going to place that like so. Press it firmly in place and move on to the shutters. Now the shutters you can install either tightly to the door, or you can leave a shadow line, a gap between them. I prefer to leave a gap. Now generally I use a toothpick. Unfortunately, I didn't bring a toothpick. So I do have another piece here that is roughly the same thickness of a toothpick. So I'm going to set that between the bird door and the panel itself. Apply glue to the back side of the panel. And make sure that the bottoms are flush. So you want the bird door bottom and the shutter bottoms to all be flush. Now the one thing I didn't mention when I put the bird door on, there is a smoother side to the bird door. That's the side you want facing you. So you want that facing up. Again, a little bit of glue to the shutter, the second shutter. And I'm just gonna carefully slide my gapper, move it to the other side, line up the bottom again, press it firmly in place, and make sure we got the wider side at the bottom. I moved it a little bit there. Let's try that again. And let's get our spacer in there. Okay, make sure it's lined up again, and then I'm going to pull the spacer out carefully this time. Maybe I'm going to pull it out. There we go. And remove the spacer. I'm just going to eyeball these, adjust them a little bit because I see they're off just a little bit. The toothpick definitely does work better than this, but they don't have to be exact. All right, with that done, you might want to sand the balcony sides before installing it. It's going to be a lot easier to sand it before it's installed rather than after. So I'm just going to carefully sand off the two sides, and if you need it, you can sand the front also, the bottom and the top if you want. But I'm just taking enough to knock off the pores that are inside. And then we're going to apply, again, a bead down each one. Rub it in with your finger. This again is the porous wood. Rub that one in. And then apply your bead on top of that. So we're applying glue twice to that. Just line it up so it is centered and flush with the bottom of the shutters. Press it in place gently, and with your toothpick, if you have a toothpick, wipe off any excess glue squeeze out that comes out of this. And I'm just going to leave it for now. You can wait a few minutes, so you don't have to do it right away. I'm going to let it set up, and I will set that aside. Okay, I have allowed everything to dry. The roof is now dry, the body is now dry, and the trim is now dry. And I've also taken the time to cut out our handy little paper tape measure here. I am going to use that to properly place the roof. So I'm going to grab, I've already removed the tape from the roof, and I've also taken the time to remove the tape from the body. With the tape coming off of the back side of the body. Now we want it off of the body, not off of the trim. We're going to measure from the back of the body. And now this doesn't have to be exactly, but this is how I have it set up. So it's going to be 1 inch hanging off of the back. And hopefully you can see that. Let's turn to this camera. I think that camera can see it. So we are at the 1 inch line. So we have 1 inch hanging off the back, and the rest is hanging off of the front. So a majority of the roof hangs off of the front. Remove that for a second while we apply glue to just the front and the back. We do not want to apply any glue to the sides. Those are going to be air vents. So we want air to be able to flow through there. That way it'll keep the house a little cooler and allow for air to flow through for the birds. And again, our right size bead of glue. Using our handy tape, I'm just going to mark it at the 1 inch and watch as I place it down. Like so. Now, if the roof doesn't fit snugly, you may need to apply tape again like we did in the previous step. However, mine fits pretty tight, so I'm going to use a couple of rubber bands instead. 2 at the back and 2 at the front. And that way I can continue with the flourish, so nothing will be in my way. Now we are going to install the flourish. The flourish is designed to go about halfway between the leading edge of the roof and the body itself. So about halfway. You can place it where you think it looks good to you. It doesn't have to necessarily be in the center. I'm going to carefully flip the house over onto one of the roof panels while we do this, and everything is being held in place. I'm going to pull the rubber bands all the way out so it holds the roof tight, and I will do this side also, and hopefully without breaking the rubber bands. All right, so now the body is being held firmly to the roof. I will apply a very thin bead. Now there's, again, a rougher side and a smooth side. We want the smooth side facing out. So I'm just going to apply a real small bead of glue across the 90-degree miter. Now I'm using my finger, my pinky, to kind of guide the glue bottle. And actually I guess I'm using my ring finger to guide the glue bottle. And that'll help guide the glue down the center. And then also I just run my finger down the side just to push the glue back away from the front. Again on this part. And that just pushes it towards the back. I don't know if you can see that, but it pushes the glue back. We want the squeeze out to go in back. So I'm not going to measure this. I'm just going to place it where I think it looks right, which is about right there. Now we're not going to worry about the glue squeeze out right away. We will actually tape it in place first. Now it's a little tricky to tape the flourish in place, but not that difficult at all. What we do is fold the tape over and squeeze it together on part of the flourish there, and then I'm going to pull the tape taut and run it down the roof. Then I will flip it over to the other roof panel, apply another piece of tape. Now I'm using the 1.5 inch just because it is convenient, but the 1 inch is just fine. Again, squeeze it so it's tight to the flourish, line up the flourish, and pull the tape taut. And just double check for any gaps. We will wipe the excess glue off there and proceed to the base. I'm just going to set that aside. And we're going to insert the 4 screws into the base. Another part I didn't show you. I didn't show you the 4 screws that come with the kit. But there will be 4 number 8 wood screws that come with it. And this is where your number 2 Phillips screwdriver comes in handy. Or this is where it comes into play. I'm going to save time, use a drill driver, and I've already pre-inserted 3 out of 4 of the screws. And as you can see, they stick out about 1/4 inch, give or take. They're about halfway in there, maybe a little over halfway. Now insert them from the bottom. The bottom is where the countersink hole is. And that's to hide the head when you're done. So we will do the last one about halfway. Now before installing the base to the body, I recommend, definitely highly recommend, allowing the corner blocks or the screw blocks to dry overnight so they are securely dry. I'm going to push it just so I can finish the video, and we'll see what we get. I'm going to pause real quick and adjust some of the things in the birdhouse, wipe some of the glue off, and we will be back for the final step of the Romeo and Juliet Birdhouse Kit. All right, to attach the base, I've pulled out a second one that I have built so I can show you, so you can see through the birdhouse. As you can see, we got the blocks in the bottom, and I ran the screws through. Now the hole that's in there is a drain hole. I don't know if you can see that. That is a drain hole in case water gets into the bird. Well, water will probably get into the birdhouse. If it does, it will drain through there. But I've inserted the screws, and now I am going to line it up. You want the sides, both of the sides, to be even along with the back. So all 3, the 2 sides and the back, are all going to be equal amounts. So just kind of move it around until you get the placement right. And I'm just eyeballing it. If you're off a little bit, it's not really going to matter. No one will notice. And just take your time. Get it where you like. And once you get it in place, then I'm going to press down firmly on what would be the roof, but I'm going to push down on the sides because there's no roof on this. And I'm just indenting the screws into the screw blocks. That'll leave enough of an indent to hold it in place while I screw on the bottom. I am going to flip it over while pressing firmly on the bottom. And then starting with one of the screws, I am going to unscrew it, back it out until the base contacts the body. Then I'm going to screw it back in. And I'm going to do that with the other front one. I'm going to take it out. And as you take it out, you can feel the base move down. Then we will push firmly and screw that one in. And it may not be tight the first time, so you may have to repeat this step. But we'll do another side, another corner. And do the final corner, unscrew it, screw it back in. We'll check, and as you can see, we got a pretty decent gap there. So we will loosen two sides. We'll do the side ones until it is tight again. Now I'm going to push down and screw them back in. And that's usually all it takes, and that is all it took. Flip it over. Do the same with the other side. Oops, wrong way. Unscrew it first, then push it tight. And there you have it. You have all four screws in. The base is tight all the way around. And we can then put the roof back on. This is not the roof that goes with this one, but put the roof back on and you are good to go. All right, that wraps up the Romeo and Juliet Birdhouse Kit. I hope you found this video helpful, and I hope you enjoyed building your birdhouse. A couple of things I just want to mention before I go. If you plan on painting your birdhouse, what I would recommend is the little jars of acrylic water-based paints that you can get at most hobby stores or arts and crafts stores such as Michael's. Hobby Lobby carries them, and there are a few other stores that carry them. But the most important thing is, if you're going to put your birdhouse outside in the elements, you want to protect it with a spar urethane or a spar varnish. You really want to make sure that it's well protected. I've had a couple of birdhouses for several years now that I've sprayed with the spar varnish. Actually, this spar, whichever one I use, I think it's the spar varnish, and they've held up great with no problems. They wipe clean. It works really good. Don't paint the inside of the birdhouse though. Don't apply anything to the inside of the birdhouse. You don't want to affect the birds. Again, my name is Todd. I really want to thank you for hanging out, and I hope again you enjoy building your birdhouse, and we'll see you back next time.